of why it's a problem, what we want to do about it, and possibly how you can help. And on this first slide, it says a biological wildfire, and so basically weeds tend to take over, and it's not really as bad as this biological wildflower fire says. Um, the Summit County weed manager Ben Plyman and Steve Elzinga, the U.S. Forest Service guy, they say, well, there's no emergencies with weeds, but we have to be persistent working with them. So basically, I want to tell you about our program that ESWA has put together, and how we want to work with friends of Dillon Ranger District to expand our persistence in working on this problem. So just a quick thing about ESWA. So ESWA used to be the Friends of Eagles Nest Wilderness, and so we take care of 3 wilderness areas in Summit and Eagle County. So Ptarmigan Peak, Eagles Nest, and Holy Cross Wilderness. We do a lot of the similar things to FDRD. We have a volunteer wilderness ranger program. We have a Sawyer's program. We do trail projects, and we have our noxious weed program. The one thing that's different is we do more able to do more advocacy for issues that might be in front of the legislature or Congress or something, because we're not quite as closely aligned with the Forest Service as FDRD does. So what are noxious weeds, and why do we worry about them? So I get this question all the time. Got it from my dad. He said, "You never weeded my yard. Why are you weeding the forest?" But basically, noxious weeds are, they're really pretty flowers that have been brought in mostly by people. So they're weeds they're flowers that have been brought from different parts of the world, and they don't have any natural predators in this area that might take them. So once these start growing, like musk thistles or this oxeye daisy in this picture over here, once they start growing, they spread pretty completely through an area of the forest. And they create monocultures. They take over for the natural plants. And when they do that, they start taking away the forage for animals. So a lot of these noxious weeds, they're called noxious because animals don't like them. So they can eat them and get sick, or they might be prickly and take away places for native animals to lay down or rest or anything. So basically, it not only takes away the natural plants, but it also the animals suffer too. So ESWA first started looking at this, or Friends of Eagle Nest Wilderness in those days started looking at this in 2007. And ever since then, we've had various programs for trying to study and control the weeds. I thought I'd start out just by giving you a little picture of the problem. I couldn't quite get a great topo map on this, but this is a map of the wilderness areas we look at. So you can see here, this is Lake Dillon, and here is Vale, and here is Minturn, and Mount Holy Cross is here. And this red line is I-70. And all the black dots around here are weed infestations that the U.S. Forest Service knows about and tracks. So they spend a lot of time going out and doing GPS coordinates of where weed infestations are. And there's something like 11,000 tracked weed infestations in Eagle and Summit County. So we've been coordinating with the Forest Service to track some of these areas, the ones that we think are most threatening to the wilderness. And we've been working closely with the Forest Service to understand where they need some help in in attacking these weeds, tracking these weeds, and educating people about weeds. Some of the major areas are hotspots that we look at are, this is a list here. We've treated some of these. We've treated Acorn Creek and I'm, I'm looking through the list here. Acorn Creek, Brush Creek. We're looking at doing Slate Creek and Surprise Lakes this year. So like I said, we work really closely with the Forest Service, and the three main things that we do are education, mapping and measurement, and then funding treatment. So the first thing we do is try and teach people how to recognize weeds. So and it's being complicated by the coronavirus this year, but we're trying to pull together training programs to go out and identify the weeds. There's 37 weeds that the Forest Service tracks. We're not equipped to do all those weeds, but I'll show you the weeds that we'll be working on. And we do things like we provide a thistle guide that can show you the types of thistles that are bad in our areas. We have training for our volunteer wilderness ranger team. So when we train them in the spring, we hand out a laminated set of pictures of the major weeds we're looking at, so they can take it with them and identify weeds. And then we have weed pulls, and we're still trying to figure out a weed pull for this year where we can go out and to an area that has a lot of musk thistle and pull it. And I'll talk more about that later. The second part of our program is the mapping and measurement program. And I think this is probably the most important one for us helping out the Forest Service, because they need eyes on the ground, feet on the ground to look for the weeds and identify places where new weeds are popping up that they might not know about it. So we're training a smaller team of weed spotters who can go out and on their normal hikes begin looking for weeds and track when they find them, take pictures and get a GPS location of the pictures, and we'll create maps that show where weeds are and report those to the Forest Service. And then the third part is we've done grants to help the Forest Service supplement their weed treatment program. They, like most federal budget things, they have a limited resource. So if we are interested in protecting the wilderness, if we get a grant, we can help them bring in supplemental professionals to treat the weeds and make even more progress than they can make on their own. I thought I'd show you a couple areas to give you a little closer look at what the weed problem is. This is an area that we treated last year, and this is a zoom in on the map of Minturn. And so you can see on this map that, like, here is the main street through the town of Minturn, and down here is Martin Creek. And there's just a whole variety of noxious weeds in there. There's these thistles that are up in this way, and we treated that last year. Butter and eggs are Dalmation toadflax, which is a weed that's, I'll talk about it a little bit, but it's pretty aggressive. There's oxeye daisy, and if you happen to go hike Martin Creek and start the trail, in fact, Vail just last week was promoting, Vail Daily had an article about hiking Martin Creek and how nice the nature is, and they neglected to mention how many weeds there are on the way up at the beginning of the trail. One of the weeds that was really common on that trail is common mullein. And you'll see this all through Colorado. And in fact, it's spread so much that a lot of states have actually given up and don't call it a noxious weed anymore. But Colorado still calls it a noxious weed. If you're driving up from Denver, you can see that there's just a huge stands of this along the side of 70, and there's a lot in Summit County and a lot in Eagle County as well. And this is one of the weeds that you can actually pull it, and if you pull it, put it in a bag and put it send it, put it in the trash, that's the best way to take care of this one. You can just get it out of there. But it's so pervasive, it's going to be hard to get rid of this one. Slate Creek is one of the trails in Summit County. So this is north on towards north of Silverthorne. So this one's been treated regularly by the Forest Service, and ESWA has treated it over years. This is actually one of the prime ones we're going to treat this year, but you can see all along Slate Creek here, these are infestations of Musk Thistle that's been there for decades. And so there's a lot of on and off trail camping here, and hunters have been in there, and when you disturb the soil by camping or hunting or having horses in the area, that'll disturb the ground, and Musk Thistle likes disturbed ground, and so it starts to grow there, and that's it just keeps growing. And once the Musk Thistle takes hold, it drops seeds, and it'll last 10 years or more. This is a picture of Musk Thistle. The thing that surprised me, I just learned this recently, is Musk Thistle has actually only been on our continent for 90 years. So somebody brought it over. I forget where it was from now that I think about it. But somebody brought it over, I thought it was pretty, and planted it. And it spread, it's just throughout the United States. I was down in Denver yesterday, and I saw ones this big growing in Denver. And it's all over Summit County. So this is something that animals avoid. They won't eat it, and it also gets in the way of their habitat. I found a stand of Musk Thistle in Harrigan Creek that's so thick you can't even walk between them. This one, we can either take care of it by having professionals treat it, or you can pull it out, and that'll get rid of it. So if you see down in the corner here, this is the rosette of the first year rosette. So the first year Musk Thistle grows, it's just a small rosette like that, and you can actually pull that out of the ground, and that'll take care of it for the year for good. But then the second year it blooms, and it gets this giant growth, and it gets these pink or purple flowers, and those are the seed heads. So basically in the second year, what we need to do, if you want to take care of this by hand, is go and pull off those seed heads, put them in a bag, and then throw them in the trash in the bag so that the seeds can't distribute. But if you leave the seeds there, they'll drop, and they'll get in the ground, and they could bloom anytime in the next 10 years. So this is part of the reason we have to keep on it. You have to be persistent and keep going and treating these every year, because there's going to be more popping up this year. A lot of the people we work with worry about, there's some nice little native thistles that grow in Summit County. And so I always get the question is, how do you know what to pull and what not to pull? And that's a tough question. And, you can come learn with us, but basically the two things that are pretty good indicators are that if it's a red or pink flower like this is, then it's probably noxious, but not always. But if it takes over and it's like a whole field is like that, then we're pretty sure that it's Musk Thistle or another thistle that's a noxious thistle. So I was saying that there are a lot of weeds that are being tracked. So this is the list. I'm not going to go through it, but the U.S. Forest Service looks at all 37 of these weeds, and these are the ones they worry about. The ones with the stars are the weeds that are somewhat new and very aggressive, and if we find those, we want to get rid of those. The problem we have is as amateur sort of botanists, if they're somewhat rare, how do we find examples to see? So we're all learning how to find more and more weeds, and we start with a couple and learn a couple. It seems 1 or 2 a year. I talked to Doozy, always says, just go with 1 or 2 at a time and learn them, get good at them, and then start adding a couple in a year. So that's what we're doing. False chamomile is another one that most people know. So this is a nice white flower. And this is actually the one that got me into weeds, because when I bought my place up here in Silverthorne, we had a whole hillside over here of these, and we thought they were really pretty till we found out that they were bad weeds. So I started pulling them out and putting them in a plastic bag. This is a weed you can pull. And it took me about 10 years to get them out. But the thing we noticed is that a fox family came once we got the weeds out of there. So about when it was about 3/4 gone, that's when this fox family started showing up, and they've lived here ever since. But they don't like it because it causes skin rashes, and on wild animals, it can cause their muzzles to get blistering. One of the hard things about the chamomile is that there's 3 daisies that we see in Summit County, and only one of them is good. So this one over here, the Shasta daisy, is not a noxious weed, not an invasive species, and this one we want to keep. But the other 2 are bad. So chamomile is the one I was just talking about, and it's the smallest flower, and it has these little feathery leaves. And this one you can pull, like I was saying, you pull it out and bag it and put it in the garbage, and that's good. The other one that's bad is oxeye daisy, and you see this in a lot of gardens around Summit County. And that one is not good. It's noxious, and it'll spread, and you can't pull it either, because when you pull it, it'll just grow more, because it spreads by the roots more than a seed. So when you pull it, those roots sort of get angry, and they continue to grow. Oops. Another thistle that people worry about, and there's a lot of this in Summit County, is Canadian thistle. So this is a tall, skinny, purple. It's a purple flower as well. It's not quite as big as the musk thistle, but these are pervasive throughout Summit County. And this is one that you actually shouldn't really be pulling, because this also grows by the roots. And when you pull it, it just sort of hunkers down, and the roots spread, and it springs up some more plants. So this is one that we need the Forest Service to treat with chemical sprays or other things like that. There are ways to have bring sheep up or something that could chew on them and get rid of them that way, but that's not really very effective at this point. But each one of these plants will produce 1,000 or more seeds that just get dispersed throughout the countryside. Dalmation toadflax is another one that we really worry about, and this one is really pretty. Everybody loves looking at them, but this is really bad. It's actually a very what's the word, creative plant, because it'll spread to, it'll take over and create a monoculture, but it also has the effect that it changes the chemicals in the soil. So it produces chemicals in the soil that actually spread out and cause other plants to die. So that's when it does that, that's what creates this monoculture, and it can take over entire fields. And we can't pull this one either because it's another one that spreads by the roots, and so it can't be pulled. So this takes treatment, and it even evolves a little bit to get used to different treatment styles. So this one is a real challenge. So if you see this, we really want to know about this one. So you might be wondering, so what are the techniques for controlling weeds? There's basically 5 ways of doing it. I've talked a lot about pulling weeds, so that's manual. So basically going and pulling out the weeds. Some weeds are, and this is more practical for farms or yards, but even the Canadian thistle, which I said you shouldn't be pulling, if you can go out with a lawnmower and just keep cutting the weeds down, it just keeps them down and keeps them from flowering. But you have to be very persistent with that part. So that's not really practical in the backcountry for us to do. Likewise, livestock sort of works the same way. So you can bring in sheep and goats, and they can chew down the weeds. But again, that takes sort of persistence. And when I talked to the U.S. Forest Service about doing this one, they say that the other problem is that the livestock a lot of times like to eat the good stuff first. So you have to manage that one a little more than we can manage it. I'll skip over chemical because I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the biological, so you can get larvae and other biological agents that you can put out, and they'll go on to the plants and actually eat the plants. So little worms and things like that. And the Forest Service has been experimenting with that in some ways. So there's some things that they've used on Musk Thistle, and these don't actually kill the plants. It just weakens the plants so they can't reproduce. And so it still takes a combination of the other methods and biological when you go forward with that. ESWA hasn't actually gotten into the biological part yet. We may someday. And then the chemical treatment is the last one. So that's if going out and spraying weeds with various types of herbicides that are focused on the specific weeds. And so this is something the Forest Service does. They manage it closely because they have to worry about the environmental impact and getting it all right and making sure that it's done safely. So it takes trained professionals to do this, and that's what we hire with the grants that we've gotten. So just a little bit about what you can do. So like a lot of people ask me, should I pick weeds? And like I've been saying, some weeds respond well to picking as long as you pick that weed and bag it up and make sure the seeds don't get spread. And we've decided that for now, the main 2 things we recommend picking are the Musk Thistle and the chamomile. Those are good sort of beginner weeds that everybody can recognize. And so we'd recommend if you see those and you want to help, that's a good way, is to go out and start picking those. And like I said, with the thistle, there's a number of thistles that look alike, but usually most of the ones that are red, you can, if you pick the heads and put them in a bag, that's the best way to do it. Make sure you carry it out and get it into the landfill in the bag. The second way we can get you involved is weed pulls. And like I said, we're having a little bit of a struggle this year because normally we go out with 20 or 30 people and a couple of us can point out the bad weeds and we all go and pull weeds and put them in in bags. And usually, usually last year we went to Acorn Creek and Hunter's Knob right over up here on Route 9. And we found a lot of musk thistle and plumage thistle that we pulled, and we found a lot of Canada thistle, which we showed people not to pull. And we originally were going to do something July 11th with the Sierra Club on this, but now we're sort of thinking maybe we do a socially distant one where people go up one by one and we mark the areas with signs. But if you're interested in that, you can email me at weeds@eaglesummitwilderness.org. I'll have that later so you can write it down. And we'll keep you in touch once we figure out how to do that one. The other way we take care of the weeds is, like I was saying, through our grant program where this year we have $34,000 that we're using to hire a professional to supplement the Forest Service's efforts. So they'll hire a crew. He'll go out with a pack animal like this and the appropriate herbicides for the weeds that we're shooting. And we're going to hit, I think, 8 areas this year. We just sort of came up with the list yesterday, day before. No, I guess it's Friday. And so our goal is to start treating things like you can see back here. There's a whole bunch of musk thistle that's in the background. And so this was last year, I think up in Harrigan Creek, they were treating that musk thistle. And since those seeds, the seed pool is there. And so we'll probably have to go back every place we treat. Our goal is to keep going back till they're gone. And it might take as many as 10 years to do that or longer. The seeds will stay in the ground and stay viable for some of them 30 years. So this is not a short-term effort. So how do we identify what we want to hit? So the ones we did last year were Harrigan Creek, Martin Creek, Acorn Creek, Piney Creek, and Westlake Creek. So we got, should have added up the acres, but we got a couple hundred acres of land last year, and we got double the funding this year, and so we're doubling our effort. And we followed the classifications that are determined by the Forest Service in the state. So the Class A are ones that we really want to eradicate. So these ones are those ones with the stars I showed you before. If we find those, we want to eradicate those and get rid of them. Class B are ones that we want to manage. And so those are ones that if we find them, we want to try and reduce the size of the infestation, but principally make sure that it doesn't go anywhere new. So we want to reduce the size of the infestation and control it. And Class C are ones that pretty much have become pervasive. So those we just are containing. So we'll go around the edges, but we won't attack those in a great deal unless it's a new infestation. Here's a list of the places where we just decided on for this year. So I'll be talking about our adopt an infestation program that we have in a minute, but these are all the areas that we'll be hitting this year. And if one of these is your favorite hiking trail, contact me and maybe we can talk you into being one of the people that follows that infestation and tracks how we make progress over the next few years. just to go back to what an adopting an infestation is like. This is a map of Harrigan Creek, so you can see Route 9 here along the Blue River, and this is the trail going up Harrigan Creek. And I actually adopted this one last year, and I'll keep doing it this year. At first I was thinking, oh, there aren't very many weeds here, because I was hiking on up and there wasn't much. And then I found there are a few musk thistles over this way. It's also called nodding plumose thistle. But the amazing thing to me was, as I hiked up, there was still Canada thistle and musk thistle along this way. But I followed the track. So when our teams spray, they have a GPS and they have an exact track where they went. So I followed that track, and I came up in this section. Up here, there was about a quarter-mile circle that was just so thick in musk thistle that I could hardly get in between them. And in between the musk thistle was all Canada thistle. So that was really a shocking thing to me, is how solid these infestations get. So another thing you can do with us is actually just help not spread the weeds. So people and pets and livestock are really how the weeds get spread. So when you walk through areas that have weeds, the seeds can get on your pants or in dog's fur or on the horses and their hoofs. And so being aware of where you are and when you're near weeds and how to not spread the weeds is really an important thing. So it's just a couple things to keep in mind. So don't walk through weed infestations if you can. You might carry the seeds with you, and don't pick flowers unless you can bag them. If you do go near weeds, try and clean off your shoes and your shirts and your shoes and everything else. And same thing with your dogs. If you keep them out of the weeds, that helps a lot. One of the things that dogs tend to do is they like to dig in the ground, and whenever the ground is disturbed, that creates a fertile place to plant weeds. So if you have a dog who's been in the weeds and has weed seeds on his paws or elsewhere, and then digs and puts those seeds in the ground, that's actually planting some more seeds. When you camp, don't camp near infestations and avoid disturbing the ground, because then you might be planting seeds as well. And then the last one, with horses and pack animals, if you're a hunter or something going back, you're actually required to have certified weed-free feeds, so the animals aren't eating seeds and spreading them. And they should have weed-free feed for a couple days beforehand. As I said before, we have our measurement and monitoring program. So we're teaching our WeedSpotter team members how to go out and map noxious weed areas. So knowing exactly where these weeds are, and whether the infestations are growing or shrinking, is really important for the Forest Service planning, and it's important for groups like ESWA and FDRD to write grants, because if we can show that there's a problem and also show that we're helping with the problem, that'll really help us keep getting the grants we need to take care of these weeds. So what we're doing is we have a small group of trained volunteers now, and we'd like to have a much bigger group that can go out and every year map these locations. We'd like to get the circumference of a place like that Harrigan Creek infestation I told you about. We like to get the size of the perimeter and every year measure that to see if we're making progress. And so we're teaching our volunteer weed spotters ways to do that. And then we're marking that on the GIS. We have a GIS team that's keeping computer maps of where the weeds are, and we're trading that with the Forest Service. We have a bunch of tools. I don't think I'll go into that now because it's going a little longer than I have, but we're basically, a cell phone can do a lot of amazing things, and you can measure all sorts of, you can measure the weeds and get the GPS locations. And we really recommend, if you, like the simplest way for you to get involved is just to, if you start recognizing weeds, take a picture of the weed and send it to us. And the way that's useful is if you can enable your cell phone, and here's some instructions here. If you can enable your cell phone for GPS location, it actually puts that in the metadata of the picture. So if you send the picture to weeds@eaglesummitwilderness.org, we can open that metadata and look at where the weed is, and if it's a new area, we'll go out and look at it more and maybe measure that infestation. And if it's another area that we already know about, it'll show us that maybe there's still weeds growing there, and we got to get on that next year. And then, like I've been saying with adopted infestation, if you really have an area that you would like to hike and like to track, every area that we're treating, we're trying to get one person who's interested in hiking that trail probably twice a year. And the idea is, before that, early in the season, go up and find out, okay, what do the weeds look like there this year, and measure the size of that infestation and take some pictures and track it. And then at the end of the year, after it's been treated by the contractor, go back and verify that the contractor has done a good job. And if we do that every year, we'll be able to get a progressive view of how each one of these infestations is changing. So we're definitely looking for people who like to hike this, and it doesn't change your hike that different. So if there's a place you hike all the time, let me know, and we can get you involved. The last thing, I don't really have much to talk about this, but one thing we'd like to do is start really looking at sort of the interaction of weeds and the native plants. And sort of, we've talked to the Denver Botanic Gardens and the Betty Ford Botanic Gardens and the University of Colorado about getting involved and doing some scientific studies. We don't quite have the horsepower for this yet, but if you're a biologist or know anything that can help us get started on that we'd love to get that going next year. So let me know about that. So with that, I think I've gotten through everything for today. On this page here, I have a number of resources that you can find a lot more about weeds. Both counties, Summit and Eagle County, have great websites. You can go in and see pictures of all the weeds. Same thing with the University of the state. And if you're interested in being part of our program, you can just email weeds@eaglesummitwilderness.org and we can get you involved. On the right side, I have ESWA events we had planned, but most of these are postponed. I should have updated that. We're still thinking about having a visit to the Betty Ford Botanic Garden Center in August to look at. They do a lot of interesting things. Like last year, they collected wildflowers above the timberline in Ptarmigan Peak. They collected seeds for a seed library. So we're thinking about getting involved with them and things like that. So with that, I'll turn it back to Cam, and any questions you might have, we can chat about them.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. We
Yeah.
were talking right before he went on that you've kind of taken a very keen interest in these noxious weeds in the counties in recent years, and it's quite apparent. You know, you've got a seemingly limitless knowledge of it, and it's much appreciated for you coming over and doing this Weedinar for FDRD.
Sure.
And I really encourage anyone who's at all interested in this WeedSpotter program to reach out and email Jim at weeds@eaglesummitwilderness.org. You know, we were chatting before we went live that this is really a program that we're kind of hoping to get more involved with, and we both of these organizations have such similar goals in mind, and we want to be able to use both volunteer bases and work towards one unique goal. So I really encourage everyone to reach out if they've got some interest in that. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. And I think that this was another really successful installment of our webinar series. And I've said it in the two prior ones, but this is an awesome way for us to be able to reach volunteers without being there with them. I'll say it again, you guys are the backbone of the organization, and we miss being there with you in person, but happy to still be able to educate you in some way over the interwebs. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope that this knowledge, I'm sure it was very informative. And our next webinar, let me check the calendar real quick, is next, when is it? It is next Wednesday. John Peterson, 5 p.m. Facebook Live again. He'll be talking about his summit of Everest, as well as the 7 peaks. This is the tallest peaks in all 7 continents. So I'll give one last huge thanks to Jim. We're very appreciative at FDRD for you putting in the time and effort with this, man. So
Well, thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, we'll catch you guys next week. Take care. All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. That was
yeah,
that was awesome. So I picked up a bunch of stuff, and I was talking with my youth seasonal. So I'm like the education youth programs manager. So we're doing
I saw that
youth programs. So I think that this is something that's very achievable and also helpful for the youth to potentially impact on. We're putting right now together a educational program on biodiversity. I could see us weeding in some weed pulling and and weed bagging. I think that it plays into, breaking down it impacts biodiversity negatively. So I think that we might try to weave this in somehow.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
I'd love to do that.
And again, it's something that is of particular interest to some of our volunteers. So hopefully this will make it out and increase that interest. We had about 10 to 15 people tune in the whole time.
Okay.
It's pretty rad. And so right now it just got posted onto our Facebook page when we wrapped up the video. And
oh, good. Okay.